in your notebook? Well, so I would request the students to take down a few points when we discuss, and also get back to me with their questions, with their comments and anything. I will be open for that at the end of my lecture. I believe I have 1 hour. How much time I have? 45 minutes.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, of course.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, the time given was 1 hour, but you can extend if you want. There is no limitation of the time. We would rather like to listen to you.
Don't do that. You are inviting trouble. I will stick to I will stick to 1 hour. Probably
Yes.
15 minutes I will speak, and 10 minutes we can discuss, or maybe 45 minutes I will speak and we
Okay.
can discuss for 10 hours, 10 minutes. Okay, fine. So as I said, that I will be discussing my critical engagement with indigenous knowledge systems and with traditional knowledge systems. And today my specific topic for this inaugural address related to IKS. So I will be referring to IKS for Indian knowledge systems. So my specific title is Knowledge Reduction by Knowledge Canonization, looking through the lens of IKS. So what is knowledge reduction? First, you have to think what is knowledge reduction, and then also what is knowledge canonization. How do you canonize knowledge? You put something within a canon. Sometimes we tend to do that. We put something within a canon, we create a framework, and then we do not try to go beyond that boundary of any specific discipline. By doing that kind of canonization, to be more specific and to be more simplistic, if we read literature as story and drama and poetry just as literature, and we don't get into interdisciplinary approaches to literature, then we are canonizing knowledge. We are talking about literature only from an intradisciplinary approach. Now, I would go to define the different kinds of methodology or approaches to any kind of research. I would recommend that the students take down this very important point. Intradisciplinary is working within a discipline. So when you listen to or you study English literature only for the sake of pleasure, only for the sake of maybe enjoyment as a story or as a poem, only for its aesthetic value, only art for art's sake, then probably it becomes intradisciplinary. But those days are gone. That we study any subject only in its intradisciplinary approach. Now, what is interdisciplinary? Interdisciplinary approach is looking at one discipline through the lens of another. Say, looking at history through the discipline of literature, or looking at literature through the discipline of history, or through the discipline of medicine. So, for example, I'll give you a very, very silly and a small example. Then one of the plays of William Shakespeare, you will see that the protagonist was killed, was murdered by his wife and her lover by putting some poison in his ear. Okay, so if you look at that from interdisciplinary approach, then during that period, a new book had come from the discipline of medicine, where a certain medicine man had written that one can give a peaceful death. Now see the irony, see the paradox, that somebody is going to get a peaceful death by putting poison in his ear. So nobody will know about the murder. Next morning, that person will be found dead. So when Shakespeare wrote that play, this medicine book was also published. So Shakespeare probably took the idea from that book, and then he used that in his story. So today, if you look at contemporary Indian literatures, you will find that many of us are using folklore and mythology as a part of our research. Like Dr. Nirjarani already mentioned about my book Sita, which is Sita is a character from Ramayana, and I have deconstructed Sita vis-a-vis contemporary women and men, and I have reconstructed the character of Sita in 25 cantos, and that book is getting a lot of critical attention. Many PhD theses and MPhil dissertations have been written on that book, and a lot of research papers have also been written, and some universities are already teaching that book as a part of their MPhil and MA syllabus. So what I'm trying to tell you here is today we are actually looking at interdisciplinary research. I read 300 Ramayans when I wrote that book, Sita. A lot of folk Ramayans, like Madhav Kandali's folk Ramayan books, and some Odia Ramayans, and so many, 300 Ramayan, and the essay by A.K. Ramanujan. And a lot of books I read, and I traveled the Ramayan map of the world, starting from Nepal to Sri Lanka to Bali Island and to Thailand, to many places. Wherever there is the Ramayan tradition, I traveled, I went to those places, I took interviews with the Ramayan scholars, and then when I was beaming with ideas about the folk Ramayans, the many approaches to the character Sita, then I deconstructed Sita from Valmiki's Ramayana and from Ramcharitmanas. From everywhere, I have taken a bit of it, and then I created some kind of interdisciplinary poetry. Now, you can ask me that how do you combine poetry and research? Well, your head of the department already introduced varieties of things that I have been doing. When I take my theory classes, when I am teaching new historicism or cultural materialism, then my poetry and the examples from poetry definitely come. And when I'm writing poetry, examples from theory and examples from my critical pedagogy will definitely come. And my ideas of folklore, my folklore research, without fail, they enter into my classrooms, my poetry, my stories. So I think the same happens with all of you when you are too deeply engaged with varieties of research. So the students sitting here, I would recommend that do not be intradisciplinary, rather be interdisciplinary. Look at your discipline through the other disciplines. Only the other day, I was taking classes with, I belong to the English department, but I was taking classes with the history department, PhD and MPhil scholars, where we were talking about history and historiography. What is history and what is historiography? I was giving them examples. History of a person, a writer, and historiography of a writer. They are so different from each other. And also, I was discussing ethnomusicology with them. Now, what is ethnomusicology? You must have read that the history of any civilization is written by the winner, the powerful. And then what happens to the history of the so called loser? If there is anything called a loser, then what happens to the history of the loser? The history of the so called loser or the weak person or the weaker section or the marginalized, the subaltern, is written by the folklorists and the ethnomusicologists. So when you read history, you look at ethnomusicology. When you read literature, you look at history. So this is how you create an interdisciplinary approach to any kind of research. After interdisciplinary, I would talk about transdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary are the research methods which people use synonymously. They are more or less similar, but yes, there is a thin line of difference. Interdisciplinary research, as I said, is looking at one disciplinary discipline from the lens of the other. And now, transdisciplinary is when you are creating a new knowledge system by taking ideas from different disciplines. And multidisciplinary is creation of a completely different discipline and a knowledge system where you have an interdisciplinary approach. You take books from medicine, from history, from literature, from geography, from all parts of the world. You take, the ideas, and then you create a new discipline. Now, having said that, I would recommend that you go to the UGC website. Students, please go to the UGC. No, not now. After my lecture, now don't open your mobiles. After this lecture, you just go to the UGC website, and then you can look at the syllabus of IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems. uh, I'm designing an MA program in Indian knowledge systems, which will be launched very soon. I will come to that. I will come to have a discussion on that. But before that, I would suggest that please go to the UGC website and find the syllabus of Indian knowledge systems. You will find that it's so interesting. So many varieties of things are there. I'll just give you a hint of that. Uh, well, just bear with me. Well, probably we'll come to that later. Now let me finish this lecture, then I'll go to that. So, in that syllabus of IKS, of Indian knowledge systems, you will find things from literature, from the Ramayana, from the Mahabharata, and from the Vedas, Upanishads. You will find Indian philosophy. You will find things from metallurgy, from physics, from Vedic Ganit, from Vedic mathematics. You will find chapters from Western writers like T.S. Eliot, like Hermann Hesse, those writers who have been influenced by the Indian knowledge systems and Indian philosophy, and they have written. Even W.B. Yeats and his occult philosophy, W.B. Yeats and his Indian philosophy, the ideas from the Indian philosophy. A lot of things have been assembled together. Well, I don't know if the word assemble is right to use here. It's truly, truly multidisciplinary. The IKS syllabus is truly multidisciplinary. So when you are doing your PhD thesis, when you are doing your PhD coursework, try to look at one discipline from the perspective of another so that you are truly interdisciplinary. Having said that, let me go back to Indian knowledge systems. Indian knowledge systems has always faced some kind of epistemic injustice. Now, to justify that, I think all your English teachers will agree with me that our English departments have always confined themselves to extreme Eurocentrism and Anglo Americanism. I, for one, I am a teacher in a university since 2 decades, and I have designed academic programs on American poetry, on American drama, on British romantic literatures, and then on post colonial literature, where I have taken different world literatures. But then in the year 2006, when I joined Indira Gandhi National Open University, the world's largest university in terms of students' intake and the academic programs, I did a need assessment survey. In order to teach in our university, we have to first of all do a need assessment survey, and I noticed that we had all kinds of academic programs like British and American literature and Australian studies and Canadian studies, and we have linguistics and whatnot, but we had nothing related to Indian folk literature. There was nothing related to Indian folklore. So in the year 2007, when my need assessment survey was over, I proposed a program, a diploma in folk literature, and it was a Herculean task. I have gone through many fire tests when I designed that program. I got questions from the boards, from the academic councils, from the disciplines, from the departments. Why folklore? Why do you need to do folklore in an English department? Even my seniors told me that, Nandini, you are too young, you are going to ruin your future. If you get into folk literature, you better be safe. People want to be safe. So they do the canonical studies like American and British literature. Well, I'm a big admirer of American and British literature because I have been teaching those subjects forever. The great masters of British and America have always guided me to be a poet and to be a teacher. But at the same time, I designed that diploma in folk literature by doing that need assessment survey. And in our university, unlike yours, when we have to design, we have to launch a program, first we have to write the entire material. So, which means almost 20,000 pages in print with zero plagiarism. So, we have to write the entire material. We have to put the material, printed material on the table, and then we have to announce that program. So we announced that diploma in folk literature in the year 2008 because getting so many 300 chapters written and writing most of the chapters myself and editing those, going through those, because folklore is a very, very sensitive subject, it definitely was a Herculean task. So I took a lot of time, maybe 1 year to design that program. And then the response of the students was overwhelming. So today, with the new education policy, everyone is talking about languages, and everyone is talking about going to the Vedas and going to the knowledge systems, going to Indian literatures and Indian knowledge systems. People have started talking now, just last year or a couple of years. But during a period when no one even thought about Indian knowledge systems, no one talked about folklore and culture studies, I had the audacity of introducing diploma in folk literature in the year 2018 with 14,000 students. I got overwhelming response even at that time. And since then, there is no looking back. A lot of universities in many parts of the world have invited me in the meantime to design their diploma and MA programs in folk literature. When I went to Central University, Odisha, I was having a discourse about that with your Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, that we should introduce Indian knowledge systems and indigenous knowledge systems and folk literature in your university, along with not as a substitution to, but as a complement or along with the American and the British literature courses. And he was very, very agreeable to that. And he said, Madam, very soon we will create a platform through which we can invite scholars like you to talk about Indian knowledge systems and design our academic programs. And I think today is the day one of that. And thanks and deep appreciation for Dr. Nijarini that she took the initiative of thinking about Indian knowledge systems. We have been trying to bring folk literature and Indian knowledge systems to the table. There was a time when a school of thought, a very, very rigid school of thought, believed that anything that is oral is folklore. Anything that is documented, anything that is written, loses its folkloristic, loses its folklore elements, and it becomes uh, Indian literature or any kind of literature but folk literature. So they belong to that school of thought. But well, I belong to the new school of thought of folk literature where we need to document our oral literatures. I believe that we need to write, we need to document our oral knowledge systems so that we preserve those for our progeny. Who will document those? Who will create an archive? If we shy away from folk literatures and oral literatures, and if we romanticize and museumize folklore and keep it at a distance and look at it from a distance and museumize it, then probably no one is going to do it. So now it's for you, the youngsters, and for us, the university teachers. It's for us to collaborate and create a new knowledge system through indigenous studies, through our oral literatures, document them, create an archive, and present it to our future. Otherwise, after another, say, 50 years, 100 years, the Indian knowledge systems will be passe. They will go to oblivion. No one will even think about them. No one will even talk about them. Our children will not understand what do we mean by knowledge systems. So this is what I mean, but by saying that knowledge canonization is knowledge reduction. And the opposite to that is knowledge dissemination is knowledge production. When I say knowledge reduction, I also talk about knowledge production. And knowledge canonization, its opposite, if I am correct, it can be knowledge dissemination or being very flexible to knowledge. So the folk literature program that I designed for my university, after that diploma, let me get back to my experiences. After that diploma, when there was overwhelming response, then in the year 2017, I designed one MA English course titled Indian folk literature. That is an elective course, MEG 16. If you go to our website, you'll see it's open access material. MEG 16 is Indian folk literature, where I have taken texts like Pather Panchali, Gopinath Mohanty's Poroja, even Varier Elwin's When the World Was Vain, When the World Was Young, and A.K. Ramanujan's 300 Ramayans, and the A.K. Ramanujan's folk tales of India. Apart from that, I have also taken the Western theorists like Vladimir Prof and all of them, whoever talked about folk theories. I have also taken them as a part of one or two courses. Now, when I'm talking about Indian knowledge systems and MA program, I will be taking majorly, say, 90% of which will be Indian theories and Natya Shastra and all of them, Ramayana and Mahabharata and Vedas and Kalidasa and Sanskrit literature and even Panini, Kautilya, and in the grammarians like the experts of Indian grammar, grammatology. I'll be taking all of them. At the same time, I'll be taking some Western scholars. Like I already mentioned, and at the end of the lecture, I will also mention those Western scholars again. I would be taking them as a part of the syllabus where, we will talk about how there was knowledge, exchange of knowledge between India and the West. You will be surprised if you look at the exchange of ideas and the exchange of the knowledge systems between India and the West, where there was a time when there was no aeroplane, there was no easy means of travel, but at the same time, there was knowledge exchange as good as today. In fact, today we have blocked our minds. There is mental blockages for us that we are thinking of Oriental and Occidental philosophies as two distinctly different philosophies. But there was a time when Oriental and Occidental theorists and philosophers they came together. They looked at literature from one lens, and that is how they created a knowledge system of the world. And when that was going so smoothly and so confidently, a lot of political upheavals started. The world wars started, World War One, World War Two, and then knowledge canonization started. Europeans thought that their knowledge system is better than ours, and Orientals they thought that our knowledge system is better than theirs. And slowly, this knowledge exchange and or the flexibility of the knowledge systems slowly got narrowed down. That is how we got into a kind of knowledge reduction for a period. But fortunately, last 2 decades since I think I have completed my master's and then I have got into teaching and research, at least last 1 decade, I noticed that again international tourism and travel and those things are increasing the dissemination of knowledge, the flexibility of knowledge systems, and the exchange of knowledge systems. So that is how many foreign universities are inviting scholars like me and you from India to design and develop their folklore and culture studies programs. For example, recently I designed the MA program of the Mauritius University on folklore and culture studies. And when I went there, I saw that Creole language is so important for them. Bhojpuri, imagine, Bhojpuri language is so important. French and Bhojpuri are the two most important languages in Mauritius. And when I designed their MA folk literature, I tried to look at the cultural heritages, the knowledge systems of Bhojpuri literature as well as French literature. And recently, I was there in during the G20 last month. I was delivering lectures on Indian indentured folklore. Indentured, the laborers, the trafficking or the migration of the labor class people from one place to another. So many people, so the French, the Europeans, the Britishers, when they came to Mauritius and they tried to create their colony, they took for their benefit, they took the labor class people from countries like India, especially from Bihar, even from Odisha. When I went to Mauritius, I found a lot of Odia laborers. Then they were talking in a kind of broken Odia with mixed Bhojpuri and mixed French. And then I talked to them in pure Odia, like I'm a Odia woman, so my Odia definitely is clear and pure. So when I talked to them in Odia, they were surprised. And they told that, Madam, your Odia is different from ours. Then I was trying to explain it to them why it is different, but anyway, I could not do it properly. Maybe because of that kind of mental block that they created for themselves, that the Odia that Nandini is speaking may not be the right kind of Odia. Well, let's not get into that. So the labor class people, they were taken from different parts of the country, even from Sri Lanka, even from China, from Japan, and mostly from France. And then they created a kind of dichotomy to create a knowledge system in Mauritius. And today, the Mauritians, they are very confident, and they think that they have a folk background. So I touched that sensitive point of the Mauritians, and I created their folklore and culture studies program. So for many universities, many foreign universities, when I created these programs, everywhere I told them that you should have a very flexible approach to any kind of knowledge system. You should be flexible if you think about knowledge systems. And you should also challenge the epistemic injustice being done to all kinds of knowledge systems because of knowledge canonization. And then romanticization of knowledge, and also because of the Eurocentric and the Anglo-American thinking processes of our country. So this is how the objective of my research here in the type in the lecture Indian knowledge systems is to emphasize on the Oriental and the Occidental philosophies, which are not antithetical. Oriental and Occidental philosophies are not antithesis to each other. They work together. They are not antithetical. And in contrast to the way the traditionalists they preserve it. So let us not be traditionalists in our approach, but in our knowledge systems. And then they do not perceive the world in a dualist perspective. Both Oriental and Occidental philosophies empathize or they emphasize on the causes and the consequences of any kind of knowledge system. Many people believed, and even they still believed, the Rudyard Kipling's idea that East is East and West is West. But in academia, especially in literature, there has always been an effort to problematize the this traditional thinking process. And a queer amalgamation of Oriental and Occidental philosophies, they have emerged to be an area of critical concern and critical inquiry in contemporary literary research. And it has been widely based on the academic planners, the researchers, the critics to study the origin of a theory where both Eastern and Western literatures exchange hands and they create a new genre. So in this lecture, I would attempt to, illustrate the representation of the Western and Eastern judgments under the Eastern eye. The research in this discussion may be a counter discourse to Eurocentrism, like I already told you. Well, in Hinduism and in Indian epics and Puranas, they are replete with fables, stories, parables, narratives, which chronicle the scientific ideas interwoven with the narratives. The history of Hinduism in India can be traced back to the antiquity, and though a lot of it may have been lost to the ravages of time, there is ample evidence to the same in our temples, in our cave paintings, in archaeology, and in our folk narratives and our extant manuscripts. And the objective of this research that I am doing here is to apprise the students sitting in front of me with the intellectual and the scientific tradition of ancient India preserved in the Indian knowledge systems. Ancient Indian knowledge system is a repository of all forms of knowledge like mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, geography, geometry, physics, chemistry, then medicine, and there are many more, emphasizing on literature. Romanticism on these subjects or these scientific disciplines can be found in most of our epics, in the Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, in the Puranas, in the Samhitas, and the Siddhantas, like Surya Siddhant, the Samhitas and the Siddhants. And this discussion that we are having today, I would recommend you give an importance to all the above subjects that I told when we talk about Indian knowledge system. Indian knowledge system deals with the ideas, concepts, and the tales from the system that are critical, and then they have a kind of Orientalism and Oriental approach in them. And the students who are sitting here, if you are trying to do your research, your PhD or your MPhil dissertation on Indian knowledge systems, then probably you can take down a few points, or you can take down a few, the subtitles or the titles that can be a part of your research. One is understanding the phrase Indian knowledge systems in its historicity, its geographic, and its life perceptions. And the same title has already been introduced in the UGC NET examination, titled IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems. Now you can ask me that, Madam, after doing this MA in Indian Knowledge Systems that you are designing or we are planning to design, and then after writing the UGC NET examination, what is the placement scenario? What are the departments who would give me placement? Well, this is an extremely important concern, and the government of India is taking a lot of care to create a pool of specialized people who can be placed as culture critics, as in the museums and in the universities who are dealing with Indian knowledge systems, in research and development departments, in in the museums, as I already told you, and art history and such other institutions dealing with art history, and even Bollywood and Hollywood, and even our OTT platforms, and our TV channels, our radio channels. All of them are looking for experts who have ideas related to IKS, Indian knowledge systems, and indigenous knowledge systems. I would be talking, I mean, I know that I'm already talking about Indian knowledge systems and indigenous knowledge systems together. I'm somehow exchanging between them. I'm somehow, talking about them synonymously. So please pardon me for doing it. At the end of the lecture, you can ask me more questions on that. Why do we talk about indigenous knowledge systems and Indian knowledge systems together? Now, another topic related to Indian knowledge systems is the idea of the eternal orders in IKS. What is eternal order? This has something to do with Indian philosophy. What is eternal order? If you look at the IKS syllabus of the UGC NET, you can look at the Unit 1 and Unit 2. Both the units deal with the eternal order in Indian philosophy. There are a lot of writers and philosophers in the West who were deeply fascinated with the idea of the eternal order in Indian knowledge systems, and then they incorporated those in their writings. Look at The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, that ends with Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And that those three ideas of da, isn't it? So those ideas he has taken from the Bhagavad Gita. There was a trainer, a special teacher for T.S. Eliot, who used to train him, who used to teach him Indian knowledge systems and Indian languages. Then another title or another topic for the students who are dealing with Indian knowledge systems, or they are planning to do their MPhil or PhD or something on Indian knowledge systems, they can look at the concept of the soul, rebirth, and salvation in Indian knowledge systems. Again, this is a part of the UGC NET syllabus. And then ancient system of logic or pramana or logic. How in Indian philosophy there is logic, there is deductive logic, there is inductive logic, and that is what we call pramana. How that finds a place in the English studies in India today. Now, as a very committed and a dedicated teacher of English literature, whatever I am talking here today has something to do with English studies. Please don't forget that whatever I am doing or thinking or talking to you or to any university for that matter, I always keep English studies in India in my mind, because as an English teacher, I should be doing justice to my own research and also to the research done by the students, so that once they complete their research in Indian knowledge system, they will not be out of place. I know this because last few years, I have been in many selection committees. I think more than 100 selection committees I have attended as the subject experts and VC nominee and this and that. And when people come to attend those interviews with all their degrees and with their educational qualifications, if they are trying to get into English departments as a teacher, we ensure that the person has an MA English, and the person has a UGC NET English, and the nomenclature of that program should be MA English, not like MA in English translation. It should not be like MA in English and linguistics. It should not be like MA in English and comparative literature. English departments are rather very, very rigid. And I, for one, have been trying to create that kind of flexibility in the English departments, that students who come from English and comparative literatures or English and linguistics, or maybe English and translation studies or English and interdisciplinary studies should be entertained. But unfortunately, as of now, English departments have not started doing it. So I must tell you that when you do any academic program, you also look at the UGC nomenclature for that. And here, fortunately, this MA in Indian knowledge systems that I'm talking about has a UGC NET examination on Indian knowledge system, the same phraseology, the same nomenclature, Indian knowledge systems. So your MA program should be in tandem with your UGC NET program, because for us, teachers can design and develop any program out of their fascination. If I'm interested in, say, shoemaking, or if I'm interested in fashion designing or anything, probably I can make a program of my choice. But then if there is no UGC NET examination for that, then you should never get into that. So get into any research or pedagogy for that matter only if there is one UGC NET examination. Probably as a teacher, I need not be saying this to you, but I think this is important for you. Well, then the next one, as I told, the one title of your research can be the ancient knowledge of system of logic or pramana, and then the Hindu dialogic tradition. Another title is the Hindu dialogic tradition. That is chapter 2, unit 2 of UGC NET examination, Indian knowledge systems, the Hindu dialogic tradition. So if you are looking at the Hindu dialogic tradition, mind you, Hindu studies is not Hinduism. Hinduism is a religious belief system, or whatever you understand out of Hinduism. Everyone has their own way of thinking about Hinduism. But when you say Hindu studies, this is purely academic. Hindu studies as a way of life, Hindu studies as research, Hindu studies as pedagogy. And if you want to know more about that, go to the UGC website and look at the UGC NET syllabus Hindu studies. So I have partially taken ideas from this UGC NET examination on Hindu studies also, because Indian knowledge systems and Hindu studies, these two also are in a way in tandem with each other. And then another chapter can be intellectual Hinduism, the scientific explanation of the discipline, specific historicity, and the free flow of knowledge systems. This is directly taken from the UGC NET. This phraseology is taken directly from the UGC NET. So when I talk about the free flow of knowledge systems, I am thinking about reduction of knowledge system by knowledge canonization. You canonize, you reduce the knowledge system. So this is what Hinduism, I mean Hindu studies talks about. And then Indian knowledge systems as alternative history. That is also one title. Indian knowledge systems beyond ritualism, Indian knowledge systems, the universality, inclusivity, and the flexibility, Indian knowledge systems and the Oriental explanations, Indian knowledge systems as evolution, not revolution, Indian knowledge systems problematizing Eurocentrism, Indian knowledge systems in Western hierarchy, Indian knowledge systems and Buddhism, and then methodical interpretation of Buddhism. Now, Buddhism is a subject and it needs a methodical interpretation. Buddhism doesn't mean only compassion and love. Buddhism has a critical pedagogy, which is a part of Indian knowledge system. And then one chapter can be Indian knowledge systems and Jainism, a methodical interpretation. Then IKS and transcendentalism. Then Hindu studies and Bhakti literature. Then Panini's uh, Ashtadhyay. Then Hindu studies beyond the national boundaries and Indic interpretation. Many people are talking about Indic studies today, Indic interpretation. Then 14 branches of learning in ancient India. What are the 14 branches in ancient Indian knowledge system? And then Indian philosophical systems, then astronomy and Hindu studies, health and well-being in Hindu studies. Now, here I can give you a small example on maybe my experience of dealing with the medicinal systems. This MA in folklore and culture studies that I'm talking about, you can just go to the university website, in the IGNOU website, and you can check the program guide of MA FCS, MA in folklore and culture studies, program guide of MA FCS, where a couple of chapters they talk about uh, uh, folk medicines. And I have got those chapters written by the best doctors in the country, doctors, allopathy doctors from very, very important and very famous government hospitals in the country, in Delhi. They have written the chapters as a comparative study of Ayurveda and Unani with allopathy and modern medicines. You know what they call? The allopathy medicines are peer reviewed medicines. Like you have peer reviewed journals, isn't it? You have peer reviewed journals and you publish your articles there. Similarly, allopathy medicines belong to the peer reviewed journals. I mean, the peer reviewed medicines, medicinal systems. And Ayurveda and Unani, even if they are not peer reviewed, but they are very important as an alternative medicinal system, and they are as important or maybe even more important than the allopathy medicines, because they have given the reason, because they belong to ancient Indian knowledge systems. And in ancient Indian knowledge systems, the medicines which were created by the rishis and by the researchers, by the gurukuls, were peer reviewed in their own way. They were not documented like UGCKR journals, like you all would do. They were not documented that way. But at the same time, the knowledge systems that they created in their medicines are as important as the contemporary and the modern allopathy medicines. I would recommend you go through those chapters, and if you have any doubts and queries and questions, please email those to me at my email ID Nandini Sahu at igno.ac.in. I would like to have a discourse with you. Well, now get back to the types that I was giving you. Health and well-being in Hindu studies. When I read this chapter, health and well-being in Hindu studies, they are so gender neutral. They talk about gender equality. They talk about the health of mother and child. They talk about the kind of food, nutrition that a lactating mother should be given, and they give it very scientifically. You know, for women, there are menopausal medicines in Ayurveda and Unani, and the medicines related to childbirth, and the medicines for the mother and the child, and also for weight issues and for many diseases that you have, even for cancer and even for all kinds of flu. Like when COVID was here, people were getting back to indigenous medicines. People were taking kada and whatnot. You all must be drinking kada at home when COVID was there. So there are many diseases uh, like dengue fever. As of now, in allopathy there is no medicine for dengue fever, but in Unani and Ayurveda, there are medicines for dengue. So our Indian knowledge systems and our indigenous medicines are as important as the allopathy medicines that you are taking. I would say they are even more important. I am a person too much into the traditional knowledge systems. And there are chapters where you talk about indigenous cooking, indigenous cuisine. One chapter in the program deals with indigenous cuisine. Now, during a time when pizza and burger have become password of the day for all the youngsters sitting there, you all must be salivating, thinking of the pizza and burger you will go back and have. But then there is a knowledge system where we belong to, where India belongs to. The most proteinous food and most tasty and most luxurious food can be cooked, can be produced through an interdisciplinary approach to our Indian knowledge systems. Like you have fusion music, you go to the Coke studio, you get a fusion music. Coke studio, you all must be listening to. So you get fusion music there. So if you go to our indigenous cuisine, indigenous cookery, you go to the cooking books of indigenous knowledge system, you will find fusion food, taking the spices and taking the systems, knowledge systems of cooking from our tradition, then creating a queer amalgamation between those indigenous cooking with our contemporary cooking. And interestingly, there are many novels, there are many poetry books in this course. If I get time, I can read out some of them, where the novelists, the poets, they take out excerpts, they take out passages from our indigenous medicines and indigenous cooking systems, and then they use it as a part of their novels. Now, look at Gopinath Mohanty's Paraja, for example. In Paraja, you will find gender equality and importance and power being given, empowerment for women to such an extent that you will be surprised. When I was reading Paraja, I saw that there is a village carnival. In the village, there is a carnival where in the evening, both boys and girls, they get drunk and then they dance and then they choose the partner. In the carnival, the girl has the freedom to choose a partner and then take the partner to her to a cottage provided by the Poroja community and spend a night or two with the boy. And the next morning, if the girl is happy and satisfied, or the girl is positive about the boy, then she has the freedom to continue with the boy. Otherwise, the girl has the freedom to go back. She need not marry a person with whom she has spent this kind of time. She is not compelled to marry. So look at the flexibility. Look at the gender equality and women empowerment in our folk literature and in our tribal literatures. And if you come to our contemporary society, I doubt if we have that kind of liberty, if we have that kind of freedom and gender equality. And another thing, I'm very keen on telling you here is there is this great little tradition, great quote and little. Great is the elite or the classical, little is the low culture or high and low, what you call high and low and great and little. Low culture is the folk culture. In Western philosophical and Western folkloristic, you have great and little. But you come to Indian literature, there is no clear distinction between the Margi and the Deshi. Margi is classical, Deshi is folk. Margi is the elite, Deshi is the culture of the poor, the commoner. If you come to Indian literature, let's go to a specific example. You go to the Shiva Purana. In the Shiv Puran, you find the narration of Lord Shiv is given in Sanskritic languages. In Sanskrit, in very high sounding and very floral language, Lord Shiva is described. And Sati and Parvati is narrated in the folk language. And if you, I was just reading a Sanskrit and a Hindi version of that Shiva Puran, and Sati is addressed like a chori. Okay, a chori. So in Odia it will be age here, isn't it? So she is addressed like that. So in Indian folklore and in indigenous knowledge systems, you do not find that kind of distinction or that kind of diversity or dichotomy between the great and the little traditions or the Margi and the Desi. Indian knowledge systems and Indian literature is always a combination, a queer amalgamation, a positive exchange of hands between the Margi and the Desi, the great and the little. And in Indian knowledge system, there is also an example of Sanskritization. Sanskritization, upgrading your social strata, upgrading your social status by emulating, by following the practices of the so-called upper class or the upper caste. So when you look at our Indian knowledge systems, you see that there is no clear distinction between the Desi and the Margi, the high culture and the low culture. There is always a flexible exchange of hands between the so-called high and the so-called low. But when you go to the Western literature, so let us give the example of Shakespeare because everyone sitting here will understand Shakespeare. In the Shakespearean tragedies, you will always find a kind of grand style. All the Shakespearean protagonists are kings and generals. The king, very, very rich and powerful people like King Lear, like Hamlet. All the kings and generals are the protagonists of the Shakespearean tragedies. But if you come to our Indian literature, and especially go to the folk literature, you find that even a common man is a protagonist. Let us go back to Gopinath Mohanty's Paraja. In Paraja, Jilly and Billy and their lovers and their father, they are common people who have been victimized by the Jamindari system. They have taken a loan, they are not able to repay the loan. The interest amount has taken, payment of the interest amount has only taken their entire lifetime. And then at one point of time, they go to protest. Now, in Indian knowledge system, folklore is used as a part of your protest literature as well. Look at our Indian folkloristic. Who hasn't heard the songs, oral little folklore folk songs like say "Khoob ladi mardani, wo to Jhansi wali rani thi." We hear that kind of oral uh, uh, lore, and they are transferred from generation to generation, and they create nationalism. If you look at Desha, Nadu, and Rajya as concepts, let me repeat Desha, Nadu, and Rajya as critical concepts, then Desha is a political concept, Nadu is a cultural concept, and Rajya is a concept of the nation. Nation, nationality, and nationhood. But again, coming to Indian folklore, there is no such clear demarcation, no such clear distinction between Desha, Nadu, and Rajya. You can just Google one of my interviews with Padma Shri late Professor Manoj Das, where he asked me a question, Nandini ji, please define Desha, Nadu, and Rajya. And then I had a very deep and intricate discourse with him, with Padma Shri Manoj Das sir. He was like my guru and my role model. I used to read a lot of Manoj Das literature. So Desha, Nadu, and Rajya are concepts in our Indian folkloristic where there is no clear distinction, no clear dichotomy. So when the students are talking about health and wealth being means well-being in Hindu studies, they should understand that here Hindu studies is used as very, very scientifically. Hindu studies is not Hinduism. That is not Hinduism as a religion, but as a scientific approach. And then also another title the students can consider for their research on IKS is, Indian knowledge systems and architecture. You go to our art and architecture. You go to our temples. Look at our Konark. Look at the Lingaraj temple. Look at Puri Jagannath temple, or so many temples in the country, Ajanta and Ellora. You look at the geometrical patterns. So, in one of the chapters in this MA program that I'm talking about, I'm also discussing the geometrical patterns in Indian temples. Imagine the Konark temple. Let us take example from our Odisha. The Konark temple and its center point is so geometrically perfect that even after thousands of years, after so many attacks by the attackers, or after so many cyclones, or everything that the natural calamities happening out there, the geometrical center of the geographical center, or the pattern of the temple is so perfect that the temple has not yet broken down. The temple survives, and it will survive the test of time, isn't it? And then you can also talk about Indian knowledge systems and mathematics. Well, Vedic Ganit. Vedic Ganit is coming up in a big way. In our department, one certificate course in Vedic Ganit is going on, where students from many disciplines, starting from English to history to science and technology, they are joining this program. And let me give you an information here with all happiness that this MA in folklore and culture studies that I have designed and that's running from our department has more than 15,000 students, and out of which 50% of the students are literature people like you all. Another 50% of the students are from science, technology, medicine, geography, history, and whatnot, anthropology. A lot of people from different disciplines have actually come up together, and then they are enjoying the program and they're contributing to the program. Now, I'm recording hundreds of lectures on that program, and if you, as faculty or students or researchers, want to be a part of that recording, please get in touch with me, because I'm actually creating a pool of specialized experts like you all on Indian knowledge systems. So please contribute to my work. Please collaborate with me. And then, well, another chapter can be your Indian knowledge systems and chemistry and metallurgy. This I have taken directly from the UGC net. Chemistry and metallurgy. They are a part of Indian knowledge systems. And Indian knowledge systems and ecology. You literature students might be discussing a lot about eco-criticism, about ecofeminism. And when people talk about eco-criticism, they safely go to Amitabh Ghosh and eco-criticism, the use of born baby myth, born baby folklore, or Amitabh Ghosh closeness to the Ibis River and the Ibis trilogy people somehow play around with that, which is very, very good. My students have also done their PhDs on Amitabh Ghosh and the ecology. But I would say be flexible. Go beyond that, go beyond literature, create a new historicist approach. Now, what is a new historicist approach? Students, please take down. Back home, please read New Historicism as a Literary Theory. Raymond Williams and New Historicism. Just have a look at that. New Historicism is parallel reading of two books, one from history, one from English, or one from English, one from anthropology. So, parallel reading of books from two disciplines to create a new knowledge system. Knowledge production by knowledge dissemination. So, produce new kind of knowledge, that I would say. And then Indian knowledge systems and Kala. I have taken this from the UGC net. Kala or art. Now, by arts, I mean a lot of things. Under arts, you have music, you have literature, you have everything actually. You have poetry, you have dance, and the painting and whatnot. So, Indian knowledge systems and Kala, that is one chapter where we are talking about all kinds of 16 arts of Indian heritage, and we are trying to uh, talk about them vis-a-vis literary texts. Mind you, always I am thinking about literary texts of Indian literature, of Indian Bhasha literatures. India has 22 languages. Uh, there are many critics who feel that Indian knowledge systems should be Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. Yes, definitely it should be Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. Like the subtitle of this lecture is also Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. But then Indian knowledge systems is the terminology of UGC net as well as the English departments that we are doing. If the 22 languages, including Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Odia, and Assamese and Konkanis and Goan, everyone is going to create their own MA programs or BA programs on Indian knowledge systems, and they are going to create their own terminology related to IKS. And we should be very flexible to accept the 22 languages and the terminology of all the 22 languages, rather than sticking to our language, Indian knowledge systems, or he or she or any ABC's language titled Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. In Odia, it can be Bharatiya Gyana Parampara. In Tamil, it can be something different. In Malayalam, it can be something different. And we as Indians, as multilingual people, we have to be very flexible with our approach to language as well. And for that, I would recommend to read a few chapters from this program or elsewhere. I have done a lot of research on language death. Well, initially in the world there were 6 lakh languages, and today there are only 6,000 languages. What happened to all those languages? Tell me. So many lakhs and lakhs of languages died a natural death because nobody documented them, because nobody bothered to create an archive for them. There is no language archive. So those languages died a natural death. So you as students of literature be also the preservers of languages. Try to create language archives. I have been working on a project with the Government of India on language archives where we are documenting the endangered and the dying languages of the country. And this started after COVID, when we were looking at this national education policy document which talks about the ABCD of the languages, the family languages, the state languages, national language, if there is any, we don't have a national language, the 22 Indian languages, and also the world languages. So, translating our family languages to the state languages to the Indian languages to the foreign languages. So, here translation plays a very, very important role. You, as people from Odisha, should think about translating the classical and the folk literatures of Odia into English and then give those to me for publication, so that you are contributing in your own way to create a knowledge system of Indian literatures, because Indian literatures will be read by the country and by the world only if there is translation. And you have to play your own role as translators here, so that you are contributing in your own way to the knowledge systems, isn't it? Now, Indian knowledge systems, well, another chapter from this MA program is, which is very, very good, and I'm happy to have written that, Indian knowledge systems and Jagannath cult, Shaivism and Shaktism. So Jagannath cult is so flexible. The Jagannath cult, you all are people from Odisha, so you know about Jagannath cult. Jagannath cult is so flexible and so inclusive. Lord Jagannath doesn't have complete limbs. His hands are like this much, and he doesn't have feet. His legs are also half created. And then when he can be the Lord of the universe, somebody without complete, so-called complete limbs, if he is the Lord of the universe, then I must say that he is in solidarity with the differently abled, with that so-called disabled. He takes his solidarity with them. And Lord Jagannath's skin is completely black, isn't it? He doesn't have a fair skin. So probably he is in solidarity with the dark skinned, that the dark skinned people should also be equal to the fair skinned. And this parity, this inequality should be challenged, should be problematized. This is what he means. And look at the food in Jagannath cult. The food cooked in the pot and the earthen pots. Mitti ka bartan. The food is cooked in the earthen pot without oil, without much of spices. So the food is very, very eco-friendly. The food is very friendly with the environment-friendly food, which is like Akshaya Patra. That food is never ending. Akshaya Patra concept happens only in India. In nowhere in the world you will find Akshaya Patra. What is Akshaya Patra? The never-ending food. If you go to any Indian's house, the majority of Indians' houses, you will always get food. No one goes hungry from the household of an Indian. No one goes hungry from the household of an Odia, isn't it? So these concepts, the Indian knowledge systems and Jagannath cult, and then Shaivism and Shaktism. So those things are also a part of the IKS syllabus. And then somewhere I am talking about the Puranas. Under the Puranas, I am writing chapters on cosmology. What is cosmology? Cosmology is the study of the universe. It is the study of the cosmos. Under cosmology, I am writing about the Brahmanda Purana. You can give me more ideas because Indian knowledge systems is it's so vast that no one can claim, neither I am claiming that I have taken the entire Indian knowledge systems as a part of my MA program. No, I cannot. Even no, you cannot. No one can do it. But I'm only trying to take everything possible from keeping in view the UGC NET syllabus in my mind, IKS UGC NET and Hindu Studies UGC NET, and also folk literature that I have designed UGC NET. I've taken the chapters from these two UGC NET examinations, and I'm trying to create an MA program so that whoever reads this program will be in a position to write those NET examinations in a better way. Well, fine. So under the Puranas, I'm taking cosmology. Under cosmology, I am taking Brahmanda Purana. Then another chapter I am discussing and writing is evolution. Under evolution, I am taking Matsya Purana. You read the Matsya Purana, and I have taken the translated, English translated versions of the Brahmanda Purana and the Matsya Purana. Then I have taken the solar system in my syllabus. Under solar system, I am talking about Vayu Purana. Vayu Purana, right? And then I am taking Markandeya Purana, Hiranyagarbha. The Markandeya Purana, the Hiranyagarbha. And then somewhere I'm talking about the Ramayana and the oceanography and Ram Setu. Under Ram Setu, this chapter, the scientific approach to the Ram Setu and oceanography is a part of this syllabus. And then I'm also somewhere talking about the advances in aviation and the Pushpak Viman. So, Pushpak Viman of Ravan and the aviation system of our Indian knowledge system, those two things are taken together as a part of the syllabus. And then I'm also somewhere talking about time and space in the Ramayana. And then I am talking about oceanography and Ram Setu. And then also in the Mahabharata chapter, there is one complete block on the Mahabharata where we are talking about the geometrical formations in the Kurukshetra, the Chakravyuha. The Chakravyuha and its geometrical perfection. One of the chapters is talking about that under the Indian knowledge systems syllabus. And then also somewhere we're talking about the Upanishads, the creation of the universe. And then somewhere we are talking about the Siddhantas like the Surya Siddhanta, the Pancha Siddhanta, and the Siddhanta Shiromani. So those kinds of texts, and each chapter is minimum 5,000 and maximum 10,000 words in print, with zero plagiarism and with complete pedagogy and theoretical debate and discussion. So, this indigenous knowledge system, which is also a part of our traditional knowledge system, it talks about, the patriarchal locale where we also involve knowledge systems related to the land, the plants, the animals, the awareness of the biodiversity, the food, clothing, health, aging of the body like body politics and body politic, and the factors that were understood as a part of our experiential wisdom. Experiential wisdom is the idea of the day. And also IKS is a kind of, it's a body of knowledge by a group of people through generations living in close contact with nature. It includes the systems of classification, a set of empirical observations about the local environments, about the system of self management and self governance. Now the government of India is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. What is Atmanirbhar Bharat? To me, it is to create a knowledge system of your own and create an employment for yourself where you are also a job creator. You are a disseminator of knowledge as well as jobs and employments for people. So there should be a time when we forget about being employed all the time. Rather, we should also create a system where you create employment for yourself through your attitudes close to nature, close to biodiversity, close to the ecology, and then you create a system for yourself where you can feed yourself and a group of people. As a poet, I feel that it's my moral responsibility not just to do word juggling, but to create a knowledge system or to create a support system where many people can be a part of the knowledge that I have created, and many people can contribute to that, and many people can get employment. So there are a lot of things now. Before I get into further discussion, I would like to take a 5 minutes break here, and if anyone wants to ask me any question, please go there.
Ma'am, am I audible?
You are.
Yes. So now we'll hand over the mic to our students.
Huh.
Anybody? Ma'am, are you ready to answer or would you like to take a break?
No, no, no break.
Okay, fine, ma'am.
I'm ready to
We do
answer.
have Chittaranjan Mishra sir.
I'm at
Sir, namaskar.
your disposal, so ask me anything.
Sir, Chittaranjan Mishra sir is with us. Sir, namaskar.
Namaskar, sir.
Sir, do you have any question for Nandini Sahu madam?
Unmute
Chittaranjan
yourself.
sir, am I audible to you?
He has to unmute himself.
Yes, yes, yes.
Sir, am I audible to
Yes,
you
yes.
now? I'm Nirjarini Tripathi, sir. So, do you have any question for Nandini Sahu, madam?
No, I don't have any question. I am actually interested in the new concepts that she's designing for her syllabus.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that one can create jobs and create and produce knowledge. That is
Right,
the new approach.
right,
That's
right.
why I appreciate.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So probably I should continue another 5-10 minutes and conclude, and then people can ask me more questions.
Sure, ma'am. Yeah, over to
Okay.
you.
Okay, fine. So this new program that we are designing, again, I have taken the need assessment survey and a pilot study with 10,000 people. It's a pilot study. I have created a questionnaire. Why Indian knowledge systems? What are the things to be included in Indian knowledge systems? Or do you want to go for Indian knowledge systems as a replacement or as a substitute, as an alternative to American and English literatures, or you want to read those together, something like that. So a lot of questions were there in the questionnaire, and I have, on the basis of that. That pilot study. Finally, I have designed this syllabus, and that the table of contents will be: one chapter is Indian philosophical systems, part A, and then another is Indian philosophical systems, part B. Then one is astronomy, and one is health and well-being. One is architecture. One is mathematics. One is chemistry and metallurgy. One is life sciences, agriculture, and ecology. One is Kala, and one is ancient India and the world. And there are so many things under that. In the Indian philosophical system, part A and part B, I have taken whole lot of literature. I have taken literary texts from from different branches of knowledge, like the Shastras and the Puranas and the Vedas and the phonetics and the grammar, the scientific names of the different Puranas. I have taken those and discussed those. And in the part two of the Indian philosophical system, I have talked about dharma and artha in our society in the Bhagavad Gita, in Arthashastra, and the Gurukul systems. And then I have taken texts like, well, I'll tell you. This is too much, so I'm not going to. Yes, Bhagavad Gita, then Ramayan, the different Ramayans I have taken, Mahabharats I have taken, and the society and the people and the ways of people in different parts of the world and the different approaches to the Ramayans and the Mahabharats. Then in the astronomy chapter, we have taken the calendrical system and the Panchanga and the planetary positions from the Siddhantic texts, and from Aryabhatta we have taken, and the health and well-being we have taken Ayurveda, Siddha Yoga, folk and tribal medical practices, and well, and under architecture and Indus Valley civilization and brief knowledges of ancient and medieval structures of India, from the Buddhist and Jaina temples and the Hindu temples. And we have also taken mathematics and geometry, and then decimal, the use of zero, the invention of zero in India, then Brahmagupta, so many things. And then also under the chemistry and metallurgy, we have taken the Sankhya Patanjali system and the chemistry in different parts of the country. And under the life sciences, agriculture and ecology, we have taken very many texts from agriculture. So many experts have written. There are so many, so I don't want to read it here. And under Kala, we have taken the classification of Indian classical music like Hindustani music, Carnatic music, and then also comparison with the Western classical musics for a comparative analysis, and then ancient India and the world. This block is very, very important. Under that, we have talked about the influence of the Eastern world on the Western world, where we have taken authors like Swami Vivekananda, and we have taken Aldous Huxley, Joseph Campbell, William Somerset Maugham, Nicholas Tesla, David Bohm, William James, and T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, and then Larry Brilliant, and Ram Das, Daniel Goldman, and so many other, some Indian authors, and Noam Chomsky, Indian authors, and European and American and Western authors and critics, and a comparative study of their literatures. And we have tried to create a real pool of a knowledge system where we are talking about the Indian knowledge systems. And then, am I audible? Audible? Okay. And then the indigenous knowledge systems, which are the course 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Course 6 is indigenous knowledge system, that is folklore, canon, multimediality, interdisciplinarity, and epistemology. Under that, the chapters are like folklore as a canon, folklore and multimediality, folklore and interdisciplinarity. Under folklore and interdisciplinarity, we have talked about the historical approaches to folklore, and folklore and green studies, folklore and anthropology, folklore and subaltern studies, and folklore as visual culture. And under the chapter folklore and social epistemology, we talk about folklore and caste, folklore and gender, folklore and tribes, folklore and religion. And under the course 7, Theories and Pedagogy of Folklore, we talk about the polygenetic theories of folklore, the monogenesis theories, and Indian thinking and discourses from Margi Deshi, Sanskritization, Shudrais, and the Akkampuram. We talk about the Indian thinking processes from Sanskritic, Persian, and native traditions. We talk about intertextuality and polyphony between classical and folk forms in literature. And in another block, we talk about folk movements, folklore and memory culture, folklore as protest literature, folklore as inclusivity, folklore as redemption, folklore as healing. And under the indigenous knowledge systems, another part, we talk about folk poetry, where oral epics from India by Stuart Blackburn, and then Sitakant Mahapatra, I have taken the Awakened Wind, the oral poetry from India. I have taken Sitakant Mahapatra. I have taken a lot of Odia writers here. Then Ramayana in modern South India by Paula Richman. And then Mahabharata Jinji to Kurukshetra by Alf Hildebrand. Then in the chapter short fiction and fiction, we are talking about folklore folk tales from India by Ramanujan. And by Barrier Elwin, we take When the World Was Young, and Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay's Pather Panchali, T. Shankar Pillai's Chemmin we have taken. And then somewhere we in the folk theatre and folk drama, we talk about Jatra, Kathakali, Tamasha, Nautanki, Pala, Dandanata, and then folk popular and films, then Girish Karnad's Nagamandal and Hayavadana, then Habib Tanvir's Charandas Chor, which is translated as Kam Dev Ka Sapna, Basant Ritu Ka Apna. This is Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, not Charandas Chor. Kam Dev Ka Apna, Basant Ritu Ka Sapna, that is Shakespeare in India. And under the diaspora folklore, we have taken Panchatantra, Arabian Nights, Indian indentured folklore, Hispanic and Latin American folklore, Native American women's literature as folk, then French folklore, the Cinderella folklore we have taken. And under the approaches to indigenous knowledge systems, we have taken the structural and post-structural approaches by theorists like Sigmund Freud, C.J. Young, and then we have taken so many Western theorists, and then contextualized folklore and the semiotic approaches like urban folklore, material folklore, feminist and queer approaches, and disability approaches to folklore, where Ashtavakra kind of characters are discussed from the folk and from the Puranas. Then Indian perspectives on folklore, they deal with folklore in vernacular traditions, where you have taken 22 Indian languages. Then Sanskritic, Prakritic, and Persian literary texts of the folklore. So a lot of things we have assembled together it's a very, very ambitious program. That is why 14-15,000 students are taking admission in each batch. And I'm glad to say that while Indian students are too involved with discourses related to American, British, and Australian literature, so am I. I am also too deeply connected with those. But at the same time, now Indian students have taken wings. They have tried to get into Indian knowledge systems in a big way. Everyone is trying to talk about indigenous cultural systems, and folklore is no more Nach Gana. Earlier, people used to think that folklore matlab Nachna Gana. It's not that. It's a very, very scientific approach, and a brief part of that I discussed here. And if you go to the university's website and look at the syllabus that we have designed, you will see how scientifically we have designed those. I have designed those courses, and the chapters are open access. You can read everything there and have a discussion with me. Please keep a critical engagement with indigenous knowledge systems and traditional knowledge systems, and be a creator of knowledge systems. Do not appropriate knowledge, do not confine knowledge. Knowledge should be disseminated, knowledge is flexible. There was a time when we used to say that knowledge is power. Today, in the age of internet, when knowledge is at the doorstep of everybody, just a click of the computer and knowledge is in front of you. Now, I would say knowledge is power is gone. Now, utilization of knowledge is power. How you utilize your knowledge, how you use to create a powerhouse for yourself and for your country, for your university is important. Please get there, please do your critical research and get in touch with me. I'm here to help you, to publish you, to guide you if you need. And I'm open for your opinions and ideas. Thank you.
Nandini ma'am, am I audible to you?
Yeah, you are, of course.
Ma'am, thank you so very much. I sincerely thank you on behalf of the Department of English Language and Literature for delivering such a brilliant and smooth session on Indian knowledge system. However, if your time permits, can we have maximum 10 to 10 minutes question answer session? Because what I believe our students are ready with their questions. They would love to rather interact with you rather than I say having questions. They want to interact with you. It will be a brilliant exposure for our students. So
Sure,
shall I
sure.
proceed with it, ma'am?
Definitely, definitely, definitely.
So any question from the side of the question? Fine. I will hand over the mic to our student who is from MA first semester, madam. He will first tell his name and then he will proceed with his question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Pratik Patnaik. I actually have 3 questions for you, but I will ask 2. My first question is, since you have been to Mauritius and you have contributed in their training in their syllabus, what difference did you find in the canonization of their folklore and Indian folklore? And my second question would be, okay, ma'am, did you get my question?
Well,
Actually, I paused him with the first question itself because I thought you should better first answer the first question, then we should move forward. Okay.
no, when you say canonization of their folklore and Indian folklore, I really don't get it. Whose folklore? Canonization of whose folklore, you mean?
Uh, I mean by our like Indian folklore and the Mauritius that you have been, since you
I
have been.
know, University of Mauritius. You mean that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, there is no such difference. They didn't have any program on folklore. When they invited me as a speaker to the, like you have invited me, they invited me as a speaker to talk about folklore. And then before I went there, I did some research on Creole in the languages, and then I also did some research on Bhojpuri folklore and the folk elements in France and literature of France, and then I just created an idea how to create a course for them, which is not exactly Indian folklore, but the folklore of Mauritius. And in the theoretical approaches, it was almost the same, like Vladimir Prof and morphology of the folktale and Desi and Margi, and then great and little tradition, Sanskritization, Thales paradigm, all those theories and ideas of Indian and Western folklore which are applicable to our courses. I used those as a part of their pedagogy and the theoretical framework. But when it came to the texts, like here, I read out a lot of texts for you. Pather Panchali and Gopinath Mohanty Paraja kind of texts. In their pedagogy, we took folk texts from Mauritius, not Indian texts. We took texts from Mauritian literature, and we talked about the folklore thereof. That is the only canonization and the difference. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question is, how does really Hindu studies brings inclusivity and the changes that have taken place and the evolution? How do you see that?
Hindu studies brings flexibility,
Inclusivity.
inclusivity. Well, you see, if you look at, I would recommend you do a little bit of Google search on Hinduism and Hindu studies. Hinduism is a religion, if you understand it narrowly, but Hindu studies has a very, very scientific approach. Hindu studies, the word Hindu, the origin of the word Hindu, you go there. From the word Sindhu, the word Hindu came. And Sindhu means beside the Sindhu river, the civilization that came forward, a civilization that came forth, literature and culture of that civilization. So, Hindu studies has something to do with the topography, the geography, the history of a culture, rather than just the religion of a culture. So maybe if you look at that geography and culture and mythology and folklore of a culture vis-a-vis Hindu studies, you will understand Hindu studies in a better way. Do not confuse between Hinduism and Hindu studies.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right.
I have another question, ma'am.
You ask me any number of questions. Only
How is
your HOD should allow.
like the Puranas you mentioned about Jagannath Sanskriti? How is that still valid for a research?
That is valid forever. I gave you so many simple examples like Lord Jagannath, whose limbs are incomplete. His hands and legs are incomplete. If you have seen Lord Jagannath, that stands for inclusivity with the disabled, with the differently abled. Or I talked about his dark skin, which is in solidarity with the dark skinned people in a society where the fair and the dark, they are like binaries to each other. So in that kind of a society where Lord Jagannath's culture, you don't consider Lord Jagannath as a Hindu god or something. You consider Jagannath Sanskriti as a culture, as a cult, which talks about inclusivity with body. It talks about body politics. If you look at body politics as a literary theory, body politics also deals with body shaming, with ageism and all that, with body shaming. So in the process of body shaming, the fair skinned people can laugh at, can tease the dark skinned people. So body shaming is a part of the body politics. And Jagannath culture problematizes that. If Lord of the Universe can be pitch black, completely dark, and still so beautiful, then a dark skinned person is dark and beautiful. So maybe you can look at that point of view. I mean, that perspective. And it is always, always relevant when it is eco friendly food, the food without oil and the food without a lot of spices, the food which is good for your health. So eco-friendly food and inclusive skin color and inclusivity in body politics, don't you think that it is relevant forever? I do. I think.
I was particularly asking about the like Matsya avatar and all those avatars specifically. Like, how is that relevant?
Well, let's not get into all the avatars and the nitty-gritties of the Vishnu, Lord Vishnu's avatars. Our Puranas, I will not claim that our Puranas are so good that we must follow everything. We must not follow everything given in the Puranas, like the disrobing of Draupadi in the Kurushava. No one should actually repeat that, isn't it? So, in our Puranas and in our mythology, there are a lot of things which we should read just for the sake of reading. But there are a lot of things which we should read and try to apply those in our daily lives. Like I said, in Jagannath cult, the food, the culture, the skin, the disability approach. These are the things that we must apply to our daily life, like Matsyavatara. You, as a student of literature, what I would do with Matsyavatara is I will talk about Matsyavatara, the Vishnu Purana, in relation to, say, magical realism, isn't it? So if somebody who comes out of a fish, a person, a lord who comes out of the body of a fish, maybe some kind of magical realism. I will not say that it has some kind of social contribution, but yes, it has some aesthetic value. It has some ethical value, and maybe you can talk about Matsya Avatara vis-a-vis magical realism in our mythology. Yeah, that's the only thing coming to my mind now. I'll think more about it.
Thank you,
Right.
ma'am.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yes, ma'am. One more question is there from this side. Yeah, over to you, Srishti.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. I have written down my question. It goes on. How do you address concerns related to potential cultural biases or exclusions that may arise during the process of making a more inclusive study program that you are doing for various institutions? Especially because the Indian culture is so diverse, and possibly there are quite a few cultures that have yet remained undocumented.
Hmm. You have a valid question, but no, these cultural biases will definitely come when you design a syllabus. Like in the beginning itself, I gave a disclaimer that I am not claiming that when I design a syllabus vis-a-vis Indian knowledge systems or Hindu studies, it is very inclusive and I have covered everything and anything related to Indian culture or Hindu studies for that matter. But then I have tried to take everything and I have tried to create some kind of harmony with the UGC net syllabus, which is also subject to change. Like Walt Whitman, his poetry was always work in progress, poetry in progress. I wish we have a society and a civilization where we always do work in progress. So these kind of courses every 3 years should be subject to revision. So if I have missed anything, any culture or anything, in the next 3 years when I revise, I should be able to change and include those things. For example, when I did this folk theater wala course in the year 2008, then I had missed out one thing, Videshya. I talked about Dandanata, Pala, this and that, so many I already discussed with you right now. But I had forgotten, I had missed out Videshya. So when I revised the course recently, somebody from some student only like you, he wrote me that ma'am Videshya is missing. Then during the revision we included. So the question that you asked is very very valid, but the simple answer to that is these kind of courses and programs are subject to revision, and we should always be open for that, flexible for that. And if you have more ideas, you must send those to me. If I have missed out anything, I'll definitely include those. Yeah. Right.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Ma'am, that is the beauty of the field of literature. I must say, when we start up with any syllabus, any program, we get so much of questions from side of the students even, that we try to incorporate everything later on. So this is how even the syllabus progresses, and we find changes in it, and we keep incorporating it into it. So that is why I felt that our students, our faculty members, we all can get together and build up our new syllabus. Now, with that, I hand over the mic to another student if she has a question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Sujata. Actually, I wanted to ask a question. What is the scope of research in Hindu studies, PG dissertation or PhD?
Okay, I think I've already answered to that question. For that, I would suggest just go to the UGC net syllabus again and look at the prospectus and the program guide, and also the syllabus of Hindu studies, UGC net in Hindu studies. You will get so many units, 10 units. Under each unit, there are 50 to 60 chapters. You go through those and you pinpoint on one or two, and then you just look at the possibility of getting material on that. What kind of chapter you are taking, the title you are taking, and if it's possible for you to find material and research, scope in that, then you go for it. Then you can discuss your specific titles with me from Hindu studies. Already under Hindu studies, I gave you so many titles. You can pick any of those and discuss that with me.
Ma'am, thank you so much.
Right. Yeah.
Ma'am, that's all from the side of students. Now, I would like to, any questions from the side of our faculty members?
I think I saw Panda sir sitting here. Professor Panda.
So, any question, please?
Professor Panda is there, I believe.
Sir,
Professor Chittaranjan is there.
Ma'am, he was
MC
online.
Panda, sir.
He was online and he just left. He had some other important engagements. He was in a meeting. So,
Okay.
there are no questions. Tula sir, any question for you? Sorry? Sir, you have a question? Okay, fine. Ma'am, we have one question from one of our students, and after that, I will hand over the mic to Tula sir. Even he has a question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Simran, and I did a background study of your book, Sita, and I found an article that was published in Pashyanti. So you mentioned this word, Sita-ness. What is it? How do you define Sitanis?
That is my coyness, poetic liberty. Okay, by Sita-ness, what I mean, well, my Sita in this book is not a brooding, crying, complaining woman who is left alone in the forest during her pregnancy. She is not that. My Sita is a progressive, independent, eco-feministic Sita who is close to nature, who is close to planet Earth, who believes in a knowledge system. She takes care of her children single handedly. She takes care of the ashramites. She is an educationist. She is a great mother, great teacher, great cook, and a great woman. She is a complete woman in itself. By Sita-ness, I mean that I see those qualities of Sita in you, in me, in Dr. Nirjarini, in Professor Chittaranjan, in everybody sitting here. Those qualities of being independent, being free thinking, being progressive. So I think these qualities are the qualities of Sita-ness to me, and I have coined that word Sita-ness. I took that liberty in my poem. Look at the Satyagrahi qualities of Mahatma Gandhi. In his autobiography, Mahatma Gandhi has written that I am a great follower of Sita. I believe in silent satyagraha. He doesn't attack the person in front of him if some injustice is being done to him. He silently protests. So Sita was a satyagrahi like Mahatma Gandhi, but Mahatma Gandhi was a silent satyagrahi like Sita. So these qualities are Sita-ness to me: progressive, independent, free thinking, decision maker, strong, bold, eco-feministic. Yep.
And is this the reason why you call your Sita a rebel?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you for reading Sita.
Ma'am, it's not only she, I believe, rather the whole world is reading your Sitanis and then they find a Sitanis in themselves. So Sitanis
That's
has become a universal concept now. So
right.
I will hand over the mic to another student of ours. There are a lot many questions from the students, ma'am, if you don't mind.
Right. Yeah, of course, of course.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm
Good
Arjun
afternoon.
Shekhar Ghadai from the first year of DELL. And
Right.
my question is in our curriculum, in any Odisha universities, like there are 11 to 12 universities in Odisha. So in any of Odisha university, there is no Mahabharat or the Ramayana in our curriculum. So what is the reason behind that, ma'am?
Well, I think I only talked about that last 1.5 hours, that knowledge reduction by knowledge canonization. We have canonized knowledge systems. We talk about American literatures, British literature, Australian literature in English departments, but English departments shy away from Indian texts, especially from mythical and folkloristic texts. That is the reason why not just Odisha, in any Indian university, you will hardly find Ramayana, Mahabharata kind of texts. But fortunately, this new education policy, this national education policy, has taken steps to introduce Indian knowledge systems in the Indian universities, and IGNOU is one of those rare universities where we have introduced Mahabharata and Ramayana and all of them as a part of our MA in folklore and culture studies. And this is my promise to myself that. In coming 5 years, I will try to be instrumental in introducing Indian knowledge systems, mythology, and folklore in almost all the departments, English departments of Indian universities, including yours. I am coming.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes.
That's a brilliant idea, ma'am. We all appreciate that.
Yeah.
And surely our department will be a part of it.
Yeah.
And one more question. Yes.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My
Good
question
afternoon.
will be what's the difference between folklore, folk tales, and folk literature?
There is no difference. Why should you need to know the difference between folklore is a way of life? Folklore is a way of life. Um, to be precise, of an indigenous cultural system or something, but it's a way of life. And folk literature is the literary texts, the oral literatures which are slowly documented. So folk literature will be both oral literatures and written literatures, which I call oral written continuum. 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 Oral written continuum is instrumental in creating folk literature. And folk tales are folk tales, stories, oral stories, both oral and then slowly they are written. For example, now I am doing a book, Forgotten Folk Tales from India, which will be a part of the syllabus of a foreign university, an American university, in their Indic studies departments. They are going to introduce my text, Forgotten Folk Tales from India, and you are also free to contribute there. Write some folk tale, some oral tale from your region, write it down, give the proper academic credit to the source, and send the folk tale to me. I will publish you so that you are a writer of a folk tale. Yeah,
Thank you, ma'am.
welcome.
Ma'am, our students are really excited if their
Hmm.
works can be published by you. And
Of
I
course,
sincerely believe that you will help our students and our department in
of
publishing
course.
the papers and stories. Thank you so
Wi-
very much.
Without doubt. I always publish youngsters and people who are good writers. Yep.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I hand over the mic to Manoj Tula, sir, a faculty member from our department.
Good afternoon.
Good
Thank you so much for
afternoon.
your thank you so much for a brilliant talk. Yeah, and actually, it's a remark. You are running. What I understand is you are running a program there called Indian Knowledge System, I think.
Yeah.
But is it not a contradiction from the title of your talk, canonization and reduction, by institutionalizing the very system, not Indian knowledge system? How do you deal with this contradiction? I mean, by institutionalizing itself, we are canonizing, and by that perhaps we are reducing it. How do you maintain that continuum or dynamism? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for asking this question. Actually, I purposely kept this title, sir, that knowledge reduction by knowledge canonization. We canonize knowledge, like we look at history as history, we look at geography, we look at English literature, we look at different subjects in a very canonized manner. But the student just now asked me that in our universities there is no Ramayana Mahabharata. In the English department we have only British literature and American literature. So we have canonized our departments. By that we have been instrumental in knowledge reduction. I am trying to problematize that through the title of my talk today, because in the program that we are designing on Indian knowledge systems, we have gone beyond canonization of knowledge systems. We have taken everything under the sun, everything related to Indian knowledge systems. I just read out a bit of the syllabus for you, starting from mathematics, metallurgy, physics, chemistry, everything, to engineering, technology, medicine, to literature and philosophy. We have gone beyond canonization. So, by giving this title to my talk today, Knowledge Reduction by Knowledge Canonization, I'm actually problematizing, I'm criticizing the canonization. Okay, right.
Thank you, thank you so much for your. But one small correction about that question, that we have not included the Indian epics or any Indian text into English syllabus. You know very well, in CBCS UG program, we have something called Indian classical literature.
Achha.
So that's not exactly wholly true, but
Okay.
anyway, there is a lot to be done. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
a lot to be done. Huh? It's a welcome fact that slowly schools and colleges and universities are introducing our Indian texts in the syllabus, but it's just the beginning. We have a long way to go. You are right there.
Ma'am, one more question from the side of the students, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My
Good
name is
afternoon.
Prash Tripathi.
Yes.
I just want to ask you, like Devdutt Patnaik and Amish Tripathi, they write something about Indian culture and folk. But what if I write something and which hurt some of the fault and some areas people? That doesn't show that it is the drawback to research this line or something, this area.
I didn't get your question. I didn't get it.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, I couldn't understand.
Ma'am, like Devdutt Patnaik and Amish Tripathi, they write something of the moral issue, which hurt the moral issue of some culture, some areas people. If I study about this area and also about this particular area of Indian culture and something, and I write something new, and which hurt is something other people or other areas people, that doesn't show the drawback of.
See, when, now I think I'm getting. So I have no comments about Devdutt Patnaik or Amit Tripathi or those writers. Whatever they're writing must be their purely personal views. So I will not. I would rather refrain from commenting on those. When I talk about the retelling of the Ramayana or Mahabharata or those kind of texts in our Indian university syllabi, I mean. We have to also somewhere keep the research point in our mind. There should be authentication, there should be research points, there should be referencing. If you talk about Valmiki's Ramayana, then you have to quote the kandas and the cantos properly from where all you are quoting. So the question that you asked me takes me to a very valid question that I would put here, that when it is culture and folklore, you always have the danger of getting biased by varieties of texts where there is no authentication, no research. So that is why many people, many critics also question the authenticity of folklore, the authenticity of oral literatures and mythology and all that. When it is British literature, Shakespeare has written this and so book. When it is or T.S. Eliot has written it, there is a written documentation of that. But when it comes to mythology and folklore, which is beyond history, there is no authentication. In such cases, what we should do is, rather than looking for the exact research point, we should look at the positive and the inclusive value systems of our cultural heritages and try to apply those to our contemporary living. See, for example, let's go back to Sita, the student who asked me the question. If a woman is left alone in a forest when she is pregnant, rather than committing suicide or jumping into the mouth of a tiger, that I am left alone during pregnancy, the woman should probably do what Sita did. She made the best use of both the worlds. She made best use of her motherhood, her teacher, her qualities of teaching, her qualities of cooking, or taking care of the people. Or look at Draupadi. When she was disrobed, or an attempted disrobing was there in the Kurusava. After that, what Draupadi did, probably many people may or may not like to do that. Had I been in her position, probably I won't have taken a promise that I will wash my head with the blood of that concerned person who disrobed me. Rather, I would have fought the disrobing. Probably I would have done that. I would have maybe given a kick to the person who was trying to disrobe Draupadi. I would have punched him. Probably I should have done that. So, reading mythology and reading folklore, uh, rather than looking at the authentication and the research points, if they are not available, we should only look at the moral value systems. Now, when I talked about the geometry behind the Mahabharat and the Kurukshetra, where Abhimanyu gets into what is that? Chakravyuha. Yes, Abhimanyu gets into the Chakravyuha, then he is not able to come out of it. So look at the geometrical pattern and try to understand the mathematics behind that. I have looked at it. You just Google the geometrical pattern of the Kurukshetra and Abhimanyu's fight with that. And you will find so many images, so many pictures where even mathematicians are talking about that. The specialists, the experts of geometry, they are talking about those. So probably you should look at those things which have a positive value system and relevance, contemporary relevance to our lives. And if you look at our mythology, when Karna was supposed to marry Draupadi, he lifted the dhanush and he was about to, win over Draupadi, and she was about to marry her. When Draupadi says that I don't want to marry a Sutaputra, maybe those kind of things should be looked at and should be avoided. Rather than calling somebody a Sutaputra, calling somebody a lower caste person, we may like to avoid those things. There are Pancha Mahakanyas in our mythology. Do you think that all of them have done great things? Probably a couple of them have done a few things which could have been avoided. Kunti giving birth to Karna when she was not married, and then she allows the child to go. She would leave the child in the river. Probably those kind of things can be avoided. So when you look at mythology and folklore, you don't have to really follow everything blindly. You don't have to follow everything. Look at the best practices, good governance. Look at the good governance. Now, Dhritarashtra, look at him. Did he go for good governance? I would say no. So look at our mythology from that point of view, the contemporary relevance of the mythology and folklore. Now looking at folklore, you will see so many Brat Kathaएं, Bhai Dooj, Behan Dooj, all kind of those where only women are doing all those fasting and for fasting for men when men are feasting, isn't it? So probably we have to look at even our folk practices where couple of things are not so positive, couple of things are very very negative, and we may have to avoid those things, practicing those things. So ultimately, what I would like to put here on record, that we read mythology, folklore per se, or any kind of literature for that matter, to take the best practices and apply those to our lives. Right?
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
You are.
Yes. So I don't think any more questions are there from side of our students. Any question?
One of my students is sitting here, Huma. She wants to say something.
Huma.
Yes.
Oh, she's online, I believe. Huma, can you hear me? Am I audible? Huma, are you online?
Yes, she is visible. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions from anybody from the faculty members? So, yeah, ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, of course you are.
Yes, yeah. So that's all I believe from the side of students and faculty members. No more questions. And I really am thankful to you for your patience in answering all the questions from our students and our faculty members. That was really a brilliant session that we had today. And very soon we will meet you maybe in the near future, and we can have some more sessions on this. And on this, from the side of our faculty members, on behalf of our Department of English Language and Literature, I thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for giving such a brilliant session and contributing to the intellectual part of our students. And thank you so much, Ranjan sir. Thank you, Suman. Thank you, Devadrita, Dhaniraj, Ayush, and Huma. Thank you, my dear students. Thank you, faculty members. And thank you so very much, ma'am. With this, I would like to wind up this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chittaranjan sir, namaskar. So good to see you. So good to see you. Thank you for joining in.
Ranjan sir, namaskar. Thank you, ma'am. We will wind up the session with this.
Please do that.
Students.